Welcome to Parenthood Bites, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of 3 incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 52 of Parenthood Bites. We're here today with Mallika Rao, who's an engineering manager at Netflix and based in the Bay Area. Hi Mallika, how are you today?
Hi, Chow. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you again. I think if folks remember, you were on episode 30. And at that time, I believe you had one son that was 22 months old at the time and expecting your second.
Yes, first of all, it's always nice to be chatting with you. So thanks for having me back again. And yes, my second one's here. He's 5.5 months now. Life definitely changed the second time again. So this is where we are right now.
Thank you so much for coming back to the podcast. I was looking through some of the episodes and I was like, oh my gosh, Mallika's second child is now born and I would love to hear how that's going. And I thought, why not reach out to see if you were open to talking about that? So I'm so happy you did. So thank you so much for agreeing to do a second episode.
No, of course. In fact, when you reached out, I was like, that's such a fantastic idea because I feel like I'm a different mom this time around and I have so much more going on in my head. So, very happy to be back.
You said your second son is now 5.5 months. Wow. What are his milestones right now?
Yes, so he's 5.5, and then right now he definitely has been rolling for a few weeks now. So now he's trying to use his legs to crawl backward. I know he tries to do that a lot, and he still can't crawl because he's not using his arms. But then he's very eager to start moving. So that's one thing. And then he's a very social baby. He loves connection and very happy, smiley with anyone who visits home, with his nanny, with all of us. He likes a lot of babbling and we talking to him. We're also practicing sit-ups for him. So that's fun. He's kind of looking at world through a different perspective, I guess, than just looking at the ceiling. So he's definitely enjoying that and taste testing pretty much every single thing. So that's going on in full effect. So teethers everywhere, biting, chewing, all of that good stuff.
How many teeth does he have now?
No teeth. And luckily for me, because I'm still exclusively nursing him. So, I'm like, yeah, we could all do with a little bit of delay in your teething. It's definitely good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not in a rush.
Right. I think I remember for one of them, like their teeth started budding really early, but it took a while to fully grow out. But you could see a little white dot. And like I would always kind of, use my fingers, kind of feel, is there a tooth growing out? Because like you, it's like when we're feeding, nobody wants to get bitten.
Exactly. And it's so funny you mentioned that because the exact same thing happened with Aditya. When he was, I think, 2.5 months, I was seeing like a white thing just popping out of his gums. And I was like, what else can it be? It has to be a tooth. And then when we went for his wellness check, I was like, what is he teething? What should I do? It seems a little early. And then she's like, no, it's just the bones and the teeth are going to take a while if the bones are coming now. And I'm like, okay, yes, that's good news for me. But I totally hear you.
Yeah, but it's always very exciting because you see that little white dot and you're like, ooh, something's happening. They're growing something, and every little thing. I think when you first notice that, it's like, oh, like when your son trying to crawl backwards, that must be such a cute thing when you first see it, right? And he's probably trying to be like his brother.
Oh, yes. Yeah, totally. Every milestone. And I love recording milestones. Like I have like a big list I did for Anant where, the first smile or the first word he said, what date he said, and all of that good stuff. And then for Aditya, already the list is half a page, and I'm like, yes, go slow. I want to enjoy this. I don't think I'm going to get pregnant again. So, like this is going to be my chance to kind of just enjoy every minute, every second of it. So, it's just so precious to see them grow. It's also kind of nostalgic when they kind of go from crawling to walking, let's say, and they stop crawling, because crawling is so cute. And I just feel like crawling is also fantastic physically for them, coordination wise, and it's like putting together things. And now they're moving on from crawling to walking. So it's also a little bit of nostalgia, but it's just fantastic to like see them grow and just progress, I guess, in life.
Yeah, and then when they pick up crawling, they crawl so fast. At first, they're just like kind of slow into it, and suddenly it's like, wait, they were on this side of the room. Now they're on the other side. And you got to just kind of keep an eye out for them at all times. I feel crawling, I was very nervous. But then when they start running too,
Yeah, same. I mean, 100% agree with you. Like, it just caught me by surprise every single time. In fact, even rolling with Anant, because I was a first time mom, and,
yes.
I was so used to, oh, he's going to be there, and just, turning aside and coming back. And it felt like such a privilege because he wasn't like moving. And then he started rolling, and your entire response system kind of changes, right? And then, of course, with crawling, now you're like, oh, a little bit of my freedom is gone, and your degrees are kind of going down. And of course, it's even more when they start walking. But it just caught me by surprise. I remember that phase when he went from just like rolling and turning to crawling. I was like, oh, wow, I have to develop new ways of responding to this, because my previous systems are now not effective, whatever I had. And now, like I have to incorporate movement into it. So yeah, it's funny. It's also very interesting. And in general, it just keeps us on our toes.
Absolutely. I mean, when they first start rolling, I put them on the changing table and you don't realize they're going to roll, right? And then you turn and then they almost roll off and you're like, wait, no. And so it's like I had to keep one hand on the kid as I'm getting the diaper, because it's like just that second where you're reaching for the diaper, they start turning. And at that moment, you're like, oh my gosh, things are changing now. You can't just put them down and they'll be okay.
Yep.
So you also said, with the second kid, you feel like you're a different mom now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I think I started feeling like that a little before the delivery happened as well. As I was preparing and planning for Aditya, my second one, to arrive, I felt like there were two parts in my head. One was all the theoretical rule book knowledge that I had kind of gathered before Anant, my first one, and a lot that we did for Anant, because we were first time parents, going by our knowledge that we had gathered from books, podcasts, other parents in our social circles, and mostly I think theoretical do's and don'ts around a baby, especially those first few weeks. And I've been a very firm believer of that, because I had put in a lot of thinking into how I wanted to plan it out for Anant for the first few months. As I was approaching my second delivery, I saw myself changing. And I think it was because, I had done all of that. I was definitely a believer of all that data, all the knowledge that I had gathered. But I also had a lot of physiological memory in me now, just parenting my first one and just knowing what kind of a mom I like to be, what are the emotions that rule me, and what do I go through when my baby needs me. I kind of had that in my experience, and I wanted to do the exact things that I believed so strongly in. I wanted to do them very differently this time. One of them was definitely, like how would I feed my baby? Like how much would I pump? What would be the schedule? Bottle feeds versus exclusively breastfeeding. That's just one example, but I'm quoting that because that was so much in my identity. I had thought so much about it, and now I almost felt like, like a hypocrite, because is it the same person who's wanting to do something different? But even that was true. Like the second time around, what I was feeling was also very, very honest, and I did want to honor that. And I think that was the beauty of it, because like first time we didn't have the experience, this time we had it, and the decision making criteria kind of changes a little bit. I'm like, these two babies are getting too different humans, versions of me as a mom. And, it was just very eye opening for me. And I became very self aware through that process and just had to kind of navigate that change internally.
But I think they get the best version of you at that time. Whatever decision you make, it's what you think is best for you and the baby at that time based on what you know. So I don't think it's necessarily two different versions, but it's the best version of you at that time and the best you for your kid also.
Yes, I think, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think that really resonates with me too because the first time it's all theoretical. It's just through other people's experiences. It's through what I've heard, what I've seen on TV, what I like when the baby was born that first day, I realized I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've never been around a baby in my life." Like I have no younger siblings. I've never, I've had cousins, but I've never had to change their diaper or babysit them or take care of them because they all live far away. So that was the very first time I spent such a long time with a child, And so, of course, the second time, now it's like I've spent all that time with a child. I know what a child is like. And the third time is even more different. And I think all of that is just the best me at that time for that kid. So I definitely hear you.
No, I think you put it beautifully. In fact, my kid's pediatrician was asking me the other day, hey, like, is it easier the second time around? Do you feel more relaxed? And I'm like, I definitely feel like it. I hope it's not because my standards have gone so low that now it's feeling easy. I humored about it, but I knew deep down that, we kind of held on to all those parts that were still meaningful to us from the first time and, did our best to kind of blend it in a way that we were also welcoming changes. And I didn't see how I could do it in a different way because this time there was my first one. And for example, with my first one, we did not have visitors at home for the first 3 months, maybe more, because, it was not too far from the COVID time. And we were also one of those families who was like very careful, cautious. So, especially after a baby, those were my requirements for sanity, right? But this time, because there was my first one and his life would just stall, we were meeting our friends after 3 weeks. And, we traveled when my second one was, I think, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. We took our first flight when he was like 4 months. With Anant, we didn't fly anywhere because I didn't want my baby to be exposed to air filters, till he turned one. So, crazy things like that change, right? And I'm like, that's the criteria now. And like you said, I think it's the best version of what you can think of during that time. We do crazy and funny things as parents, is what I think.
And if you had a third one, I know you said probably this is your last one, but if you had a third one, it will be a whole nother set of
Mhm.
experiences. And, that's how it is, right? Because we build on those experiences. Also, I hear you. With the first one, I think we also, if anybody visited, I had them get vaccinated for the whooping cough shot because they tell you, like everything you read, right? Your kid has no immunity, they didn't get any shots. And so it's very, very scary. And I didn't want to be the one to get my kid really sick. And I think that's just very natural.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, my number one responsibility is to keep you safe.
Exactly.
So, I do everything possible, right? Maybe we went to one extreme, but that kind of made us feel sane at that point of time. Like you said, we build up on that experience every single time.
Yeah, and we do what we know to be best for our
Mhm.
kid at that time. So, are you on parental leave right now?
Yes, I am. And I'm planning to get back to work in a couple of weeks. So 5.5 months, and Aditya will be 6 months when I go back. And I feel like that's kind of right for me, for the family. We'll see how that goes.
So, did you start the leave before you delivered, or how early did you start your leave?
I wanted to go on my leave a little before I delivered this time, because at least, before my due date. Because with my first one, I did not do that. I kind of like stopped working on a Friday and he came out on his due date. And I felt very up for it. And, like I was healthy through my pregnancy. Thankfully, I didn't feel the need and I kind of didn't have it in my bone that time time as well. So I was okay with it. But this time I wanted to kind of just have more one on one time with my first one. I also wanted a little bit more me time. I'm not sure if I really managed to get that, but it did feel very good to just not have a schedule and have any kind of time constraints on my day. So I had about 15 days because my second one came out a week later. So I had about 15 days and I felt good about it, but I would have liked a little bit more. So what I tell like my friends who are expecting babies right now is like, at least go for that 1 month you have it. And if you're able to take it and if it means something to you, maybe it's a good idea to like think about having a longer time off before the baby's here. That was my story there.
That makes sense. And what you said about spending some time with the older one as well, I think that makes a lot of sense too, because that's like the last time of his life where he's an only child.
Exactly. That was the top concern for us, I guess. And I also wanted to just like, the practical side, have more cuddle time with him, sleep next to him in his room. He usually sleeps by himself in his room, but just, like that 1 month before the second one was born, I was sleeping next to my first one. Like, I was big and I took up most of his bed, but I was still like sleeping next to him, and all those snuggles and cuddles. And yeah, that was also my way of him bonding with his brother when the second one was still in my womb. I felt like that was precious, and somehow that felt very warm. And story times, we went to museums, we did nature trails, all simple stuff. But I just love that we were able to do a little bit of that before postpartum hit, and both of our worlds changed, I guess. Like all of our worlds changed actually at home.
You said it was a chance for him to bond with baby. I definitely hear that. Did he understand that there was another baby coming? How did you introduce that to him?
We started talking to him about it as soon as we knew about it. Of course, my body wasn't changing yet, so it was difficult for him to just like fathom that tangibly. But we were just talking about it, and we would show him the ultrasound photos. And, like even when we kind of took the test, we would kind of just like incorporate him into everything that we were doing. So it was very gradual. And I mentioned that to state how gradual it was for him. And then I think when the bumps started showing up and I would do story times with him during bedtime, he would bring his water bottle and offer it to my tummy and just talk to my tummy, because I would tell that, hey, there's a baby inside. We would do all those cute things where, I got a doll and I showed him that, hey, the doll's like this inside my tummy, because I wanted to like just show it to him and demonstrate somehow that there is a baby inside that tummy. So, and he was like 16 months, I think, around that time. So how do you explain it to them, right? It's such a phenomenon and it was just so complex. But I was like, hey, like there's this doll baby inside my tummy. So we were just like communicating, and it was so funny for my husband and I to kind of go through that conversation. So, like we kept talking to him, breaking down things to him, because he didn't know the concept of a sibling, a brother, or what does it mean to have another member in the family. And then he would offer blueberries to my tummy, and, he would be very careful around it. He was always very careful and cautious around my tummy. But I was also like, the first time I was very careful with how I used my body, right, during pregnancy. And this time I was like squatting, doing all his diaper changes, like on the floor, getting up. I was very mobile and active around the home, and I didn't even realize it. So we talked to him, and of course we did all those popular things, like we got those books, we printed out personalized books, we read a lot of books to him. But I really feel like, thinking back, it was just those honest conversations that I had with him, where I was just like vulnerable and talking to him about it, even though it's a very complex phenomenon. I think that's how we kind of introduced to him, at least during that second trimester state where the bump was there, my body was changing, and he saw that transition.
Yeah, when you brought the baby home, how did you introduce the baby to him then? And how is he doing with the baby now?
Yeah, so one thing that we had decided was we'll do it in a common place, if possible, not at home or not on my lap, where my husband or I are not holding the baby. He's either in a bassinet or, in a car seat so that it's in a more neutral place. I had a C section the second time as well. So I was in the hospital for a little longer, right? So I was there for like 3 nights. So the first one was able to come to the hospital on the technically the third day. So, he came in and the baby was in the bassinet and I was okay. I was walking around. So, like he came in, we already had bought a couple of toys for both of them. So, we had planned that the baby would kind of give. My first one was already into trucks and cars at that point of time. So, we had bought a monster truck that Aditya, my second one, would. I mean, he's a baby, but still, he would keep it ready for his big brother. And my first one would bring a teether toy for him and give it to him so that, it kind of builds that give and take connection, right? So he got his toy and then he came to the bassinet. He saw his baby brother and we had kept the monster truck next to the baby. So, I was like, hey, this is your baby brother giving you a little gift for the first meeting. But my husband and I were just standing next to the bassinet. We were not holding the baby. And that was just to make sure that, when we were not holding Anant, he did not see us holding this new baby in our arms and just trying our level best to not encourage any situations to build up that jealousy. That is kind of natural to come, I guess. So a couple of our friends had recommended that and we decided to try that. So that's how the first meeting happened. And I saw it in his eyes. He was just so happy. His eyes went big and he was just so surprised. When he walked into the hospital, I was like, do you want to meet your baby brother? Because until then, he would always see my tummy. So he looked at my tummy and the bump was gone. And I was like, wow, this small baby, my toddler, he was also small. I mean, he was 23 months that time. So this tiny one already is like trying to, understand these things. He looks at my tummy, the bump's not there. Suddenly the baby's in the bassinet. So, then he looked at the bassinet, his eyes went big. Physically, his body changed. He was just so happy. And I knew it, that's the feeling that he had. And then they just hung out and, we just exchanged just like natural emotions in the room. And he hung out for a half an hour or 1 hour. And then I think he went back home. And then I think the next day I came back home as well. But it was very special and it was just, we could not plan it that way. We definitely had thought of the broad brushstrokes, I guess, but the rest of it is also their personality and, just like also leaving a little bit of it to organically span out when all of us are together. I remember very vividly.
That's so sweet. I love that. And so when you brought the baby home, does he play with the baby? Or like, I remember when we brought the baby home, the older two, there was a point when they were playing and the baby was crying and they didn't know what to do. They're trying to calm the baby down and then they try to do their own thing. And then they're like, but then it's crying. And then it's like, they try to come get me finally, to take care of the baby. But you could tell at first they were trying their best to calm the baby down and give him a toy and stuff.
Yes, that is so true. So, my first one was, I mentioned, right? Like he was 23 months when the second one came home. And that is that stage where he had big emotions. He was definitely having a broader range of emotions. He didn't know how to handle them. And it was the first time he was experiencing all these varied feelings. Despite all of that, I felt like it was so nuanced. Like you said, right? Like the first instinct is to calm the baby, and he was also very protective. Trust me, like my husband and I had read so many books and like had planned for it, like plan B to plan B. What happens if the jealousy kicks in right away, like sibling rivalry, like how do we plan for it, especially because my first one was also small. But then somehow we were surprised and we are still prepping for it because the toy sharing stage has not yet come, and it will come at some point of time, I guess. But so far he is very protective around him. He's very gentle and hugging. We have to still be there, but I feel like I can kind of trust him around the baby, and at least he doesn't try to like hit or bite or maybe pinch his cheeks. I don't see a lot of that yet. It's changing a little bit now, I would say, and I could share a few details around that in a minute. But at least when he came home, he was very protective, and I would see my second one's face. He would just be like looking at his big brother with admiration as to who is this tiny human being moving around me. He looks a little different than the rest of the, the grown-ups in the room. It was very cute to see that. There was a lot of things happening under the hood, even when those two were just interacting, and that was like so special, especially those first few weeks where both of them were like so new to each other. It was very special. But now I see that, it's kind of sinking into him that mom's spending a little bit more time. Mom's always feeding. When she's not with me, she's feeding my brother. And, so it's kind of going for the same resource. And I sometimes see that he has that urge, or he's just like a little frustrated that I'm always going to feed this baby. I do see those behavior changes a little bit, but nothing too crazy. I feel like it's coming. It's coming in some time, in a few months.
Yeah, like you said, also in that toy sharing stage where they both want to play the same thing. And there's so many things we have that we have like two of the same thing because, or three of the same thing actually, because they all want the
Yes.
same thing. So you said that on the third day, you brought your older son to see the baby. So who was taking care of your older one when you were in the hospital?
So it was our nanny and our nanny's family who were rock solid support for us through that transition. Those 3 days were very difficult for me. I might not be wrong if I say it was the most challenging time of my life, because emotionally I was just so worn down, and we did not have our families. We don't have that privilege where our families are here to help us. So, but we are very blessed to have amazing people around us, and my kids are blessed to have such wonderful people as our support system. I also have like my aunt here. My aunt and uncle are very close to me, so they were coming in the evenings to play with my first one. They had play dates with him. I'm very close to my aunt's family, so my first one was very familiar with them. So, and I trusted them with everything. She could make a meal for him. She could make decisions on the fly that were kind of aligned with how we did things at home. So it was very comforting to me that my aunt was around. But it was actually our nanny who stayed overnight. I remember I had already started to have my contractions, and I had to kind of go into the hospital at I think around 2:33 a.m. And we called our nanny, and she was here in like 15 minutes. Her mom and dad, we know their family really well now because we know them for a couple of years. But I had put together this plan beforehand where this would happen, and her dad came and stayed at our place as well because she didn't want to be alone at home, which was totally okay with us. In fact, we were happy that that was the arrangement. So they came at 2:33 a.m. They were here. My first one was in between his sleeps and wake time. So when she came in, it was like going back to a nap for him, because it's usually she who puts him to a nap. So, he was kind of going back to sleep. And then we rushed to the hospital. And after that, I think those 3 nights, she just stayed here. She stayed at our place. My aunt and uncle would come in the afternoon and stay all the way till 10 p.m., but they would go back home. And for me, I could completely trust our nanny because she and I have a great working relationship. She knows our family, she knows our lifestyle, and I know that she means the best for my baby. So I was able to like put together that plan with her as part of that system. But that was truly the most challenging part for me, and to not be at home, to stay without my first one in the hospital, just that anticipation of not knowing when the baby would come out. I was also in a lot of pain. It was just like emotionally and physically so taxing. I just wanted the baby to come out. I remember that feeling. And of course, after the delivery, at least, there was some kind of predictability into when I could come back home and things like that. But that was our plan. I must say that I had kind of thought about all of this because I knew that we wouldn't have anyone else who could support us through it. I had planned this for about 3 months before the due date, and we had kind of rehearsed the schedules. You must have seen the whiteboards that I had put on my kitchen wall. They were full of schedules for the delivery week. Where was the food? What should we do when things go missing? Or like needing to make decisions on the fly. We had thought a lot about it together as a team. So that was definitely helpful. And I was just so happy and grateful of how that week went. Of course, it was challenging for me, but like tactically, everything went well. And I think it's because we had a good team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was already tough on you with everything, right? Not knowing when the baby is going to come out, like you said, with the C section, with everything. So, knowing that your older son is in good hands and you don't have to worry about that piece, I think is huge because it would be that much more burden on you. So, it's really, really amazing that you have such a supportive group there.
Yes, totally. I think like that was my criteria to mostly focus on the first one, especially those first few weeks, because I felt like, when babies come down, they come down with a lot of good blessing and ammunition from where they come. And, much of what they need is like, are you able to take care of them, keep them safe, feed them, nap them, diaper changes? But those are their needs. But for my first one, especially because he was close to that 2 mark and he had so much more emotional awareness, we were focusing mostly on our first one, how to support him through those first few weeks. And I think like we focused so much on him. Sometimes I would feel guilty about, like, am I taking care of my second one enough? I definitely spent a lot of time with my first one because it was definitely so much more challenging for him.
And I think it's great that you did that. You're very, very intentional about making sure he gets time with you. What about after the baby is born? What are some things you're doing now to make sure that you're still being intentional about it?
Yeah, so that's why this time I decided to go with some doula support. Again, we didn't have any, support from our families during the postpartum. So, but luckily I had good references and we were able to just in time kind of run the interviews and hire doula support. And I was very happy we were able to do that. And that was very helpful, especially our day doulas. I think that support was so meaningful to me through that, the 6 weeks of postpartum, which is the most sensitive for the mom, because that unlocked a lot of my cycles to actually spend meaningful time with Anant. I remember I was going out on walks with him once I could, once my C-section wound was kind of healing and I felt up for it. We started taking neighborhood walks. But even before that, I would just sit in the backyard with him, play with his blocks, or just like be around him, talk to him. And he's very good with communication. And, usually I'm able to like talk to him and like convince him, or like, even bringing changes or like building habits, discipline. Everything can happen when I'm talking with him. And that's something that I really enjoy with him. So just being around him, talking, just letting him pick his favorite activity and then just playing together with it. And I'm also a very firm believer in like play based learning. So at this stage in his life, I'm not interested if he's like learning his ABCs or one two threes, but I'm really interested in like, playing with him and, problem solving and all the skills that they build. I think communication, influence, all those things, right? Or conflict resolution, all that I think happens through play. And I like to play with him a lot. And right now it's all pretend play. So that was what I was focusing. Even the first few weeks, there was the backyard, there was nice sunlight. We didn't have any constraints that could keep us from playing together. So I was able to do that because I had some support. They would hold the baby. I could get my shower in. I felt so much more saner this time during postpartum. I remember the first time it was like crazy overwhelming, but this time it was so much more better just for kind of unlocking those cycles.
Yeah. So, for some of the listeners who aren't as familiar, can you tell me sort of what a doula is, what they do, and how is that different from like a nanny?
Yeah, that is such a good question. Yes. And trust me, like, I did not know anything about doulas up until I was 30 weeks. And then a colleague of mine at Netflix mentioned that, hey, have you thought about hiring a doula, especially, like for your sleep, for sanity? It can go a long way. Like, have you looked into it? And I had no clue about it. And then I was like, wow, that sounds interesting and sounds like I can definitely make use of it. And I remember coming home, and the next 2 days were all about learning about doulas. And what does it mean? Where did it start from? I went all out, right? A doula is someone who cares mostly for the new mom and the newborn baby. And they are trained, they're professional about, what are the newborn needs, what are the general needs of a postpartum the mom, what is essential for those 6 weeks, which is really those 42 days, which are so sensitive for a woman after delivery, just kind of for her emotional, physiological sanity. And they know how to be around a new mom and a newborn just because they're kind of trained in it, right? So for someone like me who is very structure oriented and who likes knowing things beforehand, I felt very comfortable giving my baby for, like his needs, like maybe a diaper change or like a feed, like a bottle feed or other chores around a newborn, to a professional than probably even my mom, because like they're just so much more trained in it, and it gave me some comfort. So especially for someone like me and families like us who don't have any support, I felt like that could be very helpful. Some things that they don't do is, like chores around the home or support for the dad or support for the sibling. That's not what a doula typically does. It's mostly for the mom and the newborn. Whereas a nanny is mostly like a caretaker, and it's more for child care. They are there, let's say from 8 to 5 or your preferred times, right? Or it could just be whatever times that are meaningful to your family, but they're mostly there to kind of monitor the baby, take care of them, do everything around the baby, and whatever has been discussed between the family and the nanny, they do everything for the child's primary care, which is not what a doula is. And the doula also is like a very restricted time frame, which is for the first 6 weeks, and it's supposed to be during those weeks. Typically doulas like to end their service after that time, because that's the time that they specialize their care for. So there are day doulas, there are night doulas who can kind of take care of the baby. Really families go for whatever is the most kind of supportive for them and lets them be the kind of parents that they want to be for their babies when they are taking care, which was definitely the case for me. Just those few hours they would be around, it would make me feel like more empowered. After they left, I was more resilient and, I felt like so much more saner to kind of pick up for the rest of the day.
Yeah. So, how do you go about finding a doula?
Yeah, that was not very straightforward for me, mostly because I started out a little late, and it could be very different for families and moms who probably like start searching a little sooner into their pregnancy journey. I started a little late and I was kind of definitely rushing through it, but mostly through references. And if you have anyone in the birthing community, or maybe your massage therapist might know someone. So word of mouth definitely helps if you can get references from other moms. For me, it was all through my Netflix community of moms. They had references. I think I interviewed about 15 of them. I could have definitely done more if I had more time. And that's one thing, that's a tip that I have for moms. I had a very good experience with my day doula, but my experience with the night doula was not very good. And that was mainly because I did not know how to kind of interview and, like how much to trust and, like how to kind of maybe do a trial, which I did not do, and test them out. But that's a tip that I have, where definitely spend more time interviewing them. It was okay, it wasn't too bad, but, it could have been so much better because there are so many wonderful doulas out there. So a tip is, like spend a lot of time talking with them, inviting them home, maybe do a couple of trial sessions. Do not sign a contract for the whole time too early. Go bit by bit and those kind of things. I think Slack, other moms, you can also like search for Bay Area doulas, and there are a couple of agencies who kind of just put together a package. So my search was very shallow, and like I didn't have a lot of time to kind of research through it. But it's a very like tried and tested community if one can kind of just go down that route and explore a bit.
Awesome. Those are really great tips because I think a lot of times you don't think to like trial them and things like that. And so I think what you said is really helpful for a lot of parents who are getting a doula for the first time. So then, right now, you said doula was for the first 6 weeks and you mentioned a nanny. So, right now, childcare, is it just having your nanny or what are you doing for childcare?
Yes, so that's what happened after 6 weeks. When the doula support ended, it was mainly my husband and I taking care of the second one. And that was perfect for me because I wanted to be very hands on, and it was like exclusive bonding time with him. So that happened until the last 2 weeks when my first one transitioned to the daycare. That's when my nanny transitioned to the second one. And for us, it's just so warm that she's able to continue with us, and she will be kind of caring for my second one as well because she has cared for his brother. And we are really blessed to have that experience where she can be with us for a little longer. So yeah, so she transitioned to my second one, and I had also planned it that way where Anand can stay home for a little bit before he goes to the daycare, so that he can kind of bond with his brother and be around him. So now Aditya is 5.5 months. That's when Anand started going to the daycare, and we have our nanny now. He shadowed me a couple of weeks just to kind of like pick up on Aditya's personality, but mostly she's kind of now taking care of him fully.
Got it. And how is your older one adjusting to daycare?
Yeah, that's been quite something, I would say. It's a very interesting topic for me. Like, how do we kind of manage childcare? And for me, it was, I mentioned to you, I'm very much oriented towards play based learning. So it was priority for me, a criteria for me that for as long as my first one could stay home between those 0 to 3 years was a win for me. So I wanted him to kind of just have that experience of staying home and taking advantage of a routine based schedule, and just like sleeping in his bed, and like eating the meals that we cooked and developing those early habits, right, to summarize. And we were able to do that till he was 2 years 4 months, I guess. And he's very attached to me. And I guess I've read too many of these parenting blogs and attachment oriented parenting, gentle parenting, sturdy parenting, and all of those. But I've come to a point where I probably pick things from everywhere and I blend it together and I do my own thing, like, every other mom wants to do the best for her baby, right? So I mentioned that because he is very attached to me. He is very attached to both of us, my husband and I, but especially to me. And I don't like to call it clingy, right? I see attachment as a very positive thing. So now here I am where, it's safety for them. And for the longer term, as when they grow up, it's their compass, right? Like no matter where they go and venture out, they always have that feeling of home. So it's very much an identity for me where we were able to some degree, in some fashion, able to create that for him up until now. So when he started daycare, I was like, oh, I don't know how long he'll take to adjust. It's probably going to be. So we were planning for it, and I wanted to like stay home for a month before he was settled in. But that one was adjusting so quickly, like he surprised me. By week 2, his teacher was like, he is doing better than most of the other kids. He's going fast. Do you want to like extend half days to full days this week? I'm like, wow, sure. I mean, if he's enjoying it, let's go for it. But he surprised me. And it's probably because, like I was also sensing that he had a lot of more capacity for social interactions and engagements. And his first principles were all solid, like he knew the concept of home, family, or like the other like foundational principles, like how do you communicate, maybe problem solve, all that was he was learning. And I felt like he was kind of open for more things in his day. And now he has his friends there. So I don't know, like I was surprised he took pretty well to it. I'm like, okay, maybe I over planned for it. But the first 2 weeks went really well. What we are seeing is he does really well till 3 p.m. But after 3 p.m. he remembers me, and then once he remembers, it's a little emotional for him. So we are trying to slowly extend it to him. I've come until 3:45 now, so I usually pick him up at around 45. I'm kind of always exploring creative ideas on how do we teach him the concept of time, and like how do I tell him, hey, I'll come 10 minutes later. What does 10 minutes really mean to him? So we are there, but I feel like it's going pretty well unless it suddenly regresses. It's been a month now and it's kind of been positive. I hope it doesn't regress. but it was a little anticlimactic for me.
I mean, that's good. I think that's better than the other way around. And I think you're doing great of like gradually, introducing him to longer times because it's also training yourself too. Because training ourselves to be adjusted to being away from our kid for that long, right? Because I'm sure there's a part of you halfway through the day, you're like, okay, I could go pick him up now. But it's like, no, I gotta put him there longer.
That is so true. It was mostly me who was so restless sitting in the car. And, like, I was just so restless. I was witnessing myself. And I'm like, I need to listen to some brainless things, right? Like, just like some songs or maybe some meditative music. I remember just the third day I'm usually not like into meditation, and, I'm a very restless person. So I find it hard, but I was just sitting there for half an hour. I listened to like nice, calming sounds, and because I needed it. Maybe because my son was having such a good time there, and I didn't know what was going on inside.
For sure. There was definitely a part of me that's like, I feel like he needs me more. No, you want them to need you more, but at the same time, you're happy that they're adjusting. And it's that adjustment for you as well.
That is so true. You just spoke my mind. It's just that combination. And at the end of it, you're just happy that, they're adjusting, they're taking to it well, and it's progressing well. So that emotion always wins. Yeah. So, every day when I see him walk into his daycare, I feel like that's what life is, right? Like they'll venture out, they'll go out. It's one step away from home, and you're actually prepping them for that confidence, for that resilience, that flex that you give them. And it's such a metaphor for me every day when I see him. So it's all the journey, I guess.
And it's such a huge first step because there are so many
Hmm.
milestones they need to step into, with that being the first one.
Yep.
Now that you're on parental leave for your second child, I was just wondering, in prepping for the second kid, what do you feel like is a must have that parents should prepare when they're preparing for a second?
Yeah, I feel like it's putting together the team. It's definitely been true in my case, where it was about knowing what would we have during those first few weeks after the delivery, what would we not have, what were those resources that we could kind of rely on, knowing all the constraints of that system, knowing who they were, and putting together a plan, a vision for the kind of care that I wanted for myself, for my newborn baby, and for my family. That was my number one thing. This time I was very sure about what was the kind of experience I was going for, and I had learned a lot from my first time, and I did not want to go through certain things the second time. I wanted it to be more resilient. I didn't want to go through so much anxiety during postpartum. So for that I had to kind of prepare a plan. It was truly a vision that I had to make it an enjoyable experience if possible for the entire family, and then figuring out how the team should be. So for me it was, my nanny, the doulas, my husband, me, my aunt, my uncle. Primarily, these were the people. And then, how do we kind of delegate and make sure that they are supported? They are kind of caught up on how are you thinking about it, communicating with them, and doing all of this before the baby is here, because I felt like I just did not have any time. Even texting was so stressful for me during the first few weeks. So, I didn't want to have any unnecessary communication. I just wanted to retain the mental cycles that I had for the truly meaningful things for my family, to spend with my first one, with my husband, also to savor myself. So I would say think about that team. And I know sometimes people say that, oh, like go with the flow, keep it organic, and like it'll all figure out. But in my case, that wasn't true. And I had to kind of plan for how the first few weeks would go. And I felt really well about putting thought into it, and it gave me a lot of sanity. And I feel like it could help even if you had more support, right, from family or from anywhere else, and everyone's conditions are different. Just having that right kind of energy around yourself during the first few weeks means so much, because it's a very sensitive time for the baby, for the mom, and if there are more kids who are part of the family, for them as well. So I feel like it's a responsibility of, both the parents, especially the mom, to kind of just like think about what can help her and her babies, right? Because we are in that mama bear mode when the baby comes. So just planning for that. I would say that was like a must have that I was kind of just like grateful to have planned a little bit before.
I love that. I think you're absolutely right. Like after you have the baby, you have all these emotions. The last thing you want to do is have to think about what to do next. And then having that already figured out, people knowing what to expect, that takes that burden out. And you can just focus on you, focus on the baby, focus on your life at that moment. Thanks for sharing that. So, what's something that you would tell someone who's thinking about having more kids or who maybe has a kid and is like sometime in the future or is pregnant with more kids right now? What's something you would tell them?
Okay, I'm usually someone who likes to think about some kind of balance when I'm kind of making my points, but for this one, I'll drop it and I'll just say it as is. I mean, like, go for it, like, I feel like babies are awesome and more the better. I mean, for whatever makes sense to your family, I don't want to put like a number to it, but my thing was like, I wanted 3 kids, and I'm a big believer of like, big families, having many siblings. I just love that fact. And I had my first one pretty late. I was 35 and now I'm 37. So if I was younger, I would have definitely gone for a couple more kids, at least one more. But now I feel like I just need to, like, because it also takes away time, right? Like pregnancy and delivery and postpartum takes away some time from your life. So now I'm like, okay, maybe I should just focus on these two. And, I want to just like savor and, like I also feel like it's a little risky now for me to go through that physically. But that's just me, how things are playing out in my head. But go for it. Babies are awesome. It's such a blessing to bring babies into lives and have that responsibility of nurturing a human being. They come whole into this world, and then it just amazes me. I also have a little bit of background in early education, so it just makes me amazed when I think about the fact that here's a whole baby and I can care for this baby, and like it's such a responsibility to make them responsible citizen in the next generation, right? So it's fantastic, and I feel like if we could have as a family, we would have definitely gone for more. But I'll also share this. I would hear a lot of advice regarding the financial aspect of it, the practical aspects of it, the logistical aspect of it, and all of those are definitely true, and they are important to think about. And we did think about all of those a lot. But now when I look back, I think the joy, the value, the happiness, and just that feeling of your heart expanding, and it surprises me how much you're capable of loving, right? That is nothing when compared to a few tactical challenges. And I'm definitely not downplaying it, and I'm aware how expensive things are and all of that, and it's definitely not easy, especially in today's world and the area and things like that. But all that aside, I think just taking a step above, it's truly a blessing and it'll change our lives forever. And how, and more kids is also a blessing. It's a gift that you're giving to the first baby or the first babies, the first kids in the family. I always feel like the first kid was a gift to me, and the second kid is also a gift for us, but he's also such a gift for my first one. They'll transcend us as parents, and the love will kind of go on. And being able to create that is such a fantastic feeling. So I am like, go for it, like your life will change drastically and positively, and you'll be so glad that you did. That's what I tell the moms that I meet, the families that I meet, and like when they ask me about it. Also, I'll also say that I see a lot about moms and dads trying to, and I do that as well. I'm guilty of that as well, where we intervene a lot between the siblings, and I find myself doing that between my two boys. But I feel like I want to let them play, and of course, while being safe, they'll develop that relationship through play, and they'll kind of just figure it out as siblings, and they'll be able to build that mutual trust. That's something that I'm working on, but I would like to do more of. And it comes up in conversations with parents when, they have 2 kids and we talk about it. So it's just a thing that I would kind of bring it up with parents who are kind of thinking of having more kids. Like, can we try and get out of their way more and just let them build that mutual trust for themselves? But yeah, I think those are my ramblings on that topic.
No, no ramblings at all. Thank you for sharing that. It's very, very beautifully said. And I think, a lot of times, like you said, we think about it a lot, we consider it a lot and stuff. But when you think about the bigger picture, it's like the amount of joy they bring. I don't know, arguably, the amount of joy. Just kidding. But no, the amount of joy they bring really is really not something we can put into words. The emotions we have when we see that baby, or when we see them playing together for the first time, or when they're arguing and then I see them playing together, I'm just like, oh, okay, I forget about the moments when they were arguing just 2 minutes ago, because it's just so touching to see that.
Yes, that is so true. And it'll be very nice to hear your story sometime, Chow. You have three, and as far as I know, you're a great mom. So, we should catch up sometime and like talk about it more in detail as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things about the podcast is giving me a chance to catch up with people. But then I realized, like, oh, I need to have more frequent conversations with folks, to just hear more about their journey as parents. But thank you again for sharing your story today and sharing the updates. It's just been really awesome hearing about, how your kids have grown and how you've grown as a parent and things. So thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you for having me. As always, it's such a pleasure to be chatting with you, Chow. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And I hope you have a great rest of your week and a great rest of your parental leave. Take care.
Yes, thank you. You have a good day as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bites. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbites.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's chow, CHIAO, @parenthoodbites.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbites.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, take care and stay curious.